It's Thursday, October 5th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is Dalton Del Don. Dalton, what's going on, buddy?
Busy time of season, Harmon. I can't say I'm too sad to see the bye weeks arrive, but yeah, I'm pumped up for the Niners Cowboys in primetime this week. How you doing, man?
Yeah, huge week, huge game for the Niners Cowboys on Sunday night. You know, we've gotten a lot of Giants on primetime lately. That will be a good, I mean, we do have to suffer through the Thursday night game this week, which we'll obviously talk about here on the show. We'll preview that in the back end, but we've had some dusty primetime games lately. I think this 49ers Cowboys should be like a real nice palate cleanser.
No doubt. Yeah, it should be fun. And me and producer Colin can talk some trash to each other. Expect a close one.
Yeah, I am excited about that. I'm also excited about this episode because it's Stat Nerd Thursday. You know what we do here on Stat Nerd Thursday. We give you one stat you need to know for all 32 teams, all of the beautiful babies. We give you one stat you need to know for every single team. We go in order of the projected 2024 NFL draft order, courtesy of Tankathon. So let's get started. We actually get to skip the number one overall team here because it's the Chicago Bears who will be playing on Thursday night. We'll get to them. So we start off with the number 2 team, Carolina Panthers, who of course would not own the second overall pick if the NFL draft started today. That would actually belong to the aforementioned Chicago Bears. The Carolina Panthers, the reason that they would be picking second overall if they had that pick is because they have run the 8th most plays per drive this year, but ranked 26th in yards per drive this year. Dalton, the Panthers offense stinks. Miles Sanders is banged up, you know, despite the, he'll be totally fine reports. He didn't practice on Friday. He ceded work to Chuba Hubbard. Their wide receivers are what they are. There are all these like trade rumors now. You know, Jordan Schultz yesterday was out here like, the Panthers want to make a trade for a wide receiver, and they don't want to just trade for a wide receiver, Dalton Del Don. They want to trade for a number 1 caliber wide receiver. Well, GFL on that one, okay? Because I don't see any, unless the Raiders want to trade Devontae Adams, and I don't know that they do, and I don't know why Devontae would be like, yeah, let me go to the Panthers here. That's where I can revive my career. I don't know that I see a number 1 caliber wide receiver available anywhere, so I think the Panthers offense will remain screwed.
Yeah, especially with Bryce Young starting over Andy Dalton right now. It's just does not help the fantasy values of Adam Thielen and company. But of course, Carolina needs to stick with their young guy if he's healthy and develop him. So it's not a great fantasy situation. And yeah, they're going through a developmental season, no question. And they've suffered a lot of injuries on the defensive side. They ran 24 more plays on offense last week than the Vikings and still lost at home. So, and then they have a couple tough matchups in Detroit and in Miami the next 2 weeks. So yeah, but Bryce Young, you got to let him play. And obviously the fan base is scared looking at how, conversely, how CJ Stroud is performing.
Bad vibes in the coaching staff too. You know, Frank Reich's like, I had this play called for Adam Thielen. And then I realized he wasn't on the field, you know, which it's weird that you don't realize that. And it's also weird that you're drawing up plays specifically for 33-year-old Adam Thielen, but I get it because he's the best pass catcher on the roster, which is why they want to trade for a wide receiver. You know, I think like Marquise Brown would probably be the best option if the Cardinals wanted to trade him, even though he's not a number 1 caliber receiver. Obviously, there's like a pie in the sky T. Higgins trade if the Bengals continue to circle the drain. But and he is, you know, he did play college ball down in Carolina at Clemson, but I don't really know if I necessarily see that, and I don't know that the Panthers can. I mean, maybe they can get it done with the high second-round pick, but I mean, we don't need to sit here and talk about the Panthers any longer because they're just a disaster franchise. Number 3, Las Vegas Raiders. Josh Jacobs, 5.6 yards per touch in week 4 was his best of the season. You also noted, Dalton, that Josh Jacobs has more receiving yards than rushing this season. Andy and I said on the People's Panic Meter, Dalton, coming out of week 3, that if Jacobs didn't get home in week 4 against the Chargers, you were allowed to panic. He did get home for fantasy, obviously, with the receiving from Aiden O'Connell and the touchdown, but I don't know. What's your temperature on Josh Jacobs right now?
He's due for more touchdowns. He's fine. I mean, he got off to a slow start in part because he sat out the preseason, possibly. Dude ran for 12 touchdowns last year, only has 1 this season, despite being top 5 in carries inside the 5. He's 6th in expected fantasy points among running backs. You love to see all that work as a receiver. It's a totally condensed offense there. Jimmy G should return. I loved Aiden O'Connell as a DFS punt, but it was ugly. Although he almost had 2 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah.
Somewhere, as I wrote in my column, he's still holding on to that football. I mean, I don't know if Sam Howell says, he said, hold my beer to Sam Howell as far as holding on too
Sam
long.
Howell's
wow.
get rid of it, dude. Get rid of it.
Seriously, that was wild. But Jimmy G should return, and Jacobs is going to start finding the end zone more. And he's a good player. He's a buy low in fantasy.
I can agree with that. I think he's a buy low. Aiden O'Connell, according to Fantasy Points data, converted 77.8% of his pressures into sacks. That is, that is so outrageous.
Khalil Mack owes him a dinner. I mean, 6 sacks.
I don't know. He might owe Khalil Mack Khalil Mack might owe him a dinner. Yeah, you're right. Just because, dude, he might have extended his career another couple of years. You're right.
Totally, man. I mean, I know Daniel Jones took more sacks this week, but I'm telling you, O'Connell was responsible for more.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. 77
AOC.
Oh yeah, AOC. Man, yeah. Look, I think, and you know what's crazy too? Just by the way, we'll talk about the Browns a little bit later. I think he was actually better than Dorian Thompson.
Another guy I liked. I love those guys as super flex stashes in Dynasty. Yeah, no, they were both just flat out awful on the football field. But yeah, maybe the idea of both of them was a little better than the performances. But it's young guys; their first starts. Yeah. But yeah, it was ugly. There's no denying it. It was not great, Bob.
Let's not watch the preseason next year, Dalton. That way we don't have takes on these backup quarterbacks, and we don't get fooled by Kenny Pickett tearing up the 4th string Falcons defense.
Well, I'm riding high of my Sam Howell thing. So I just figure all of these are going to come out and be immediate starters like that. But yeah, no, that was not great for those young guys.
All right, 4th overall. I'm still reeling from the 77.8%. 4th overall, yeah. Denver Broncos. Dalton, no one really wants to say it, but Russell Wilson might be back. Or at least back to functional. So far this year, he ranks 6th in dropback success rate. He ranks 5th in EPA per dropback. He ranks 6th in PFF passing grade. And he's only had 51 yards on 6 scrambles so far this year. So not a lot going right with the Denver Broncos. They get their first win by barely beating the Chicago Bears. Their defense is a joke. They just cut Randy Gregory, who they gave a massive free agent contract to just before we taped today. So not much going right for the Broncos, but Russell Wilson is at least playing better under Sean Payton.
Yeah, don't forget he did throw a Hail Mary that was completed, but unquestionably totally, yeah. he puts up better fantasy points without Hackett. I know this can be anecdotal at times, but I think having a horrible defense like half the Broncos should lead to more passing attempts from Wilson in the second half. So it could be a nice setup for fantasy, especially with Judy, Sutton, and Mims as options and no healthy running backs. So, or a big run, even McLaughlin, he's not going to steal a bunch of touchdowns. So it is funny. Just draft whomever is ranked lower in fantasy between Judy or Sutton next year. Just draft whoever goes later. And Mims will likely start seeing more snaps too, and it'll help Russell Wilson. So the setup is there for him to continue this fantasy success. And I agree with you. He's actually performing better than he did last year, although that's a low bar to clear.
Well, there's no way these two guys, Judy and Sutton, are both on the roster for the Broncos.
Okay, that's probably fair. Yeah.
In fact, let me tell you what, the guy that
Panthers might not be on this season.
Yeah, the guy the Panthers are probably going to trade for is probably Jerry Jeudy, which... Okay. Number 5 team here, Minnesota Vikings. Jordan Addison remains 4th on the Vikings in routes run, and he has a 12.1% target share, which is ahead of KJ Osborne, 10.8. You also noted that the Vikings ran just 44 plays on offense last week. When your quarterback throws a pick 6, that's going to obviously steal possessions. It usually steals it for the other side, but that didn't really happen here. So yeah, I don't know. I think people want Jordan Addison to happen really bad, and he might happen. And he's had big plays so far this year, but I noted this yesterday when talking about the rookies with Austin Eckler. He's still kind of struggling with physical coverage at this point, and maybe that improves towards the end of the year, but he's another rookie that I think we're pushing so hard to get on the field more than he is, and he's already on the field a ton because the Vikings just pass so much. But I think a little bit of patience here with Jordan Addison before he can be a weekly starter in fantasy.
Totally fair. Just wanted to note that last week's game script was so weird. We went from 42 routes ran the week before to 14 last week. And this week, they are facing the Chiefs at home. So it should be the opposite type game script, and they should be running a lot of plays and passing a lot as well. So I could see Addison as a flex option this week. But agree with you, there's still some growing pains and learning curve here, and KJ Osborne has not gone away. And Hawkinson is a target hog.
Yeah, right. That's the thing, too, is he was always probably at best going to be the third targeted player here, even though I know there was some like yards per target stuff, which I always like kind of roll my eyes at yards per target with TJ Hawkinson, that people thought he might cede some workload here. But
I bought into that for sure. I was contributing to that narrative, but it hasn't been the case. Although Cousins' YPA has improved simultaneously. So there you go.
Kirk just loves throwing to Hawkinson. Like if he's just sitting there, like just on a little hitch route against zone coverage, like he's going to pepper Hawkinson with the targets there. You mentioned the Chiefs. The team that they almost lost to last week was the New York Jets, our 6th overall team here. Zach Wilson's 7.31 adjusted yards per attempt is the 6th best of his career. He has been viable against bad defenses. I wanted to throw this one out there because, like, in the past, we have seen Zach Wilson put together, usable games, right? And where there was this narrative like that, was that Zach Wilson's best game? Maybe it was because the Chiefs are actually a good defense, and he put up a decent game against them. He gets Denver this week though. Denver is a joke, right? You noted on the outline, like, would you rather have Zach Wilson or would you rather have Josh Dobbs as the QB DFS punt this week? I do think Zach Wilson, again, we talk about him as if he's just a completely non-functional quarterback. And I think in his own head, he gets in his own head sometimes and like he becomes a non-functional quarterback, but he has tools. We saw those tools express themselves against the Chiefs. Like he is capable of having usable games. And I think he is capable of having a usable game against the Broncos, who might just be the worst defense I've ever seen.
He runs a little. I believe Aaron Schatz said that the Broncos are the worst DVOA on defense over the first 4 weeks ever, or something that bad. And do you know that this shocked me? And I know whatever completion percentage above expectation isn't perfect by any means, but he has a higher CPAE than CJ Stroud this season. Positive 1.7. Zach Wilson. That surprised me. So
because there's so many completion percentage over
variables.
Which completion?
Oh,
percentage?
The next gen. Next gen one. Sorry. Yeah. When I write my Sunday one, I use the other, but the next gen one for the season is Zach Wilson.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm looking at it too. You're right. He
above
is at
CJ Stroud.
1.7.
He'd win a bar bet there, huh? I mean, that's definitely surprising. CJ Stroud getting 8.0 YPA, third best in football. But yeah, Zach Wilson. One worry I have is their defense is good. Is this going to turn into a slog? And Breece Hall apparently, right before we started recording, came out that he's going to be no longer on a pitch count. Robert Saleh said, so that's great news. He could have a nice game. But yeah, it coincided. Zach Wilson's best game as a pro coincided with 14 targets to Garrett Wilson. So just keep peppering him. I know Surtain is someone this week, although DJ Moore beat him last week. So I think Zach Wilson and or Joshua Dobbs are two really intriguing, cheap total. I mean, Wilson's the minimum on Yahoo DFS, $20, and I like his matchup quite a bit.
Well, at least he's started games in the NFL before, so there is that. I wanted to note this too about Pat Surtain, because I think he's like probably the second best corner in the NFL. But he hasn't had there's been some really rough moments for him in this Denver Broncos defense. During last week's game, Patrick Surtain, his dad, Patrick Surtain Sr., posted a tweet where he said, "Toiling in the soil, SMH2, which is Surtain's number, you deserve better." Interesting. I just don't think there's a lot of people that have a lot of respect for what Vance Joseph is doing on defense right now.
There are rumors over here Niners want to trade for Surtain, which would be nice. They have some cap space.
I would guess it would take a boatload of draft picks to do it, but we've seen them give up a boatload of draft picks for really good players before, so not impossible.
Maybe they really are trying to tank, releasing Gregory. Maybe they really are going that route.
Number 7, New England Patriots. The Patriots rank second to last in rate of drives to end in a score, and they rank 29th in rushing EPA. I don't know, man. I know it's only week 5, but I kind of think it's over for Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah, not great at all. Yeah, Zeke getting the touches. The offense has been a disaster. I mean, Mac Jones could have multiple pick sixes last week. Yeah, I don't know. They've suffered a bunch of injuries on defense too. It's been a horrible start. They're in such a tough division. It's It's not great. But Stevenson, yes, you're not happy if you drafted Stevenson where he went in fantasy drafts.
He went in our redraft. I think Andy and I noted this. I think he went in like the 7th or 8th round, which is one of the biggest drops among any teams.
You notice that Joe Burrow went undrafted?
I did not notice that, actually. And number 8, our seamlessly transitions here. Well done, Dalton. You're a pro. Number 8, Cincinnati Bengals. The reason that Joe Burrow didn't get drafted in our little redraft there is because the Bengals rank dead last in yards per drive. They rank 19th in pass block efficiency. You noted that the Bengals have scored the fewest touchdowns, 4. You can count the freaking Bengals touchdowns on one hand. I don't know. I just don't think it gets better. Jamar Chase knows ball because he said that Joe Burrow shouldn't play till week 5, and just keep pushing that back the longer he plays through this injury.
Yeah, he used to beat the blitz so much, and he can't do that with the calf. It feels like it runs even deeper than Burrow's injury, and now T. Higgins is injured. The offensive line additions haven't gelled during the offseason. This is really brutal looking at his YPA and lack of production. I still would absolutely be after Jamar Chase in fantasy leagues. He's due to score touchdowns. Was closer to... Last week was a joke. The Bengals did not get the football in the second half until there were 4 minutes left. The Titans had their longest drive in 20 years or something to open the second half. And it was just without Higgins, it looked like a perfect setup. Without Higgins in the second half against a pass funnel defense in Tennessee, just the plays did not go that way. This week could be very, very different. So I think Jamar Chase will still be a top 5 fantasy wideout moving forward, especially if Higgins misses 3 or 4 weeks. But man, maybe I'm even being too generous there. It's so ugly at times with this passing offense. And boy, it's not been great. And that means obviously bad news for Mixon as well.
I'm with you that Jamar Chase will have big games. I mean, we've seen him have a big game so far this year. Monday night against the Rams, he'll have his moments, and I think he ended up going in as the receiver 7 or something, maybe something like that in our redraft, which does kind of make sense. The more I'm looking at T. Higgins, I'm looking at T. Higgins' best routes in reception perception from last year. He has a really good slant route success rate, but if we're running a slant, he's never going to be the first read on that play. It's always going to go to Jamar, and they're trying to get the ball out fast. That's a problem. He's really good at running dig routes, but we're asking Burrow to drop, sit in the pocket, let a backside dig develop, and rifle it to T. Higgins. That's not going to happen. He's really good at 9 routes. I mean, obviously he's not pushing the ball down the field on a 9 route. He's really good at corner routes. Joe Burrow is not pushing the ball down the field on a corner route at this point. T. Higgins generally is 71st percentile success rate versus man player, 45th against zone. He's I would say above average to good, but not great separator. He's more of a tight coverage guy, and that's you're screwed with this version of Burrow.
Yeah, and it's looking increasingly like a lost season. Boy, there's a lot of priors involved in that spread of being 3-point favorites over Arizona based on how these teams have played over the first month of the season. I made the Cardinals my best bet of the week. I mean, sorry, they just look like a better football team from top to bottom. I mean, I get it that they're superstars, Joe Burrow and Chase, but if they start, this could quickly just become a totally lost season, and then all bets are off with Burrow's injury.
What day exactly is after what week is the trade deadline? Do you know?
I don't know, because the NFL's just been historically so boring. But the last, maybe that is a different era now.
October 31st is the trade deadline. I think I'm looking at that right. I mean, my God, let me hope I'm right. So by the way, that game, for the last game before the trade deadline for the Bengals, is week 8 against the San Francisco 49ers. I'm just living a hypothetical world here for a second, because we think this could really circle the drain. If they do lose to the Cardinals this week, right, which you're saying is possible, even just if the spread is too close. They get the Seahawks in week 6, fresh off their bye. They go to their own bye in week 7. If they come out of their own bye and they get clocked by the 49ers, they're then looking at the Bills in week 9. I kind of wonder. I kind of wonder if they think all right, well, we've only won 1 or 2 games heading into week 9. Do they think about shipping off T. Higgins? Do they think about now is the time to rest Joe Burrow because the season is over? I mean, I do think that it's dark that I'm saying this, But it is possible, and I know I just outlined the problem that T. Higgins has. Our colleagues, Charles McDonald and Nate Tice, did a great job on the Exempt List podcast on the Zero Blitz feed. Shout out another Yahoo podcast here. They did a great job breaking down why the offensive line is a poor fit for the offense that they have to run right now with Joe Burrow. And I'm saying the same thing about T. Higgins, and they can't run the ball well. Like, it just is really tough. And now, it's starting to trickle into the defense too, because they're on the field so damn much, Dalton. Like, again, these are all really good players, and things can flip if Burrow's calf is magically healthy, but there's a easy way to paint a doom and gloom picture here for the Bengals. And I'm getting like shudders even just talking about it.
Evan McPherson's been a fantasy bust too. I have that guy everywhere. I'm like, I guess I'm going to have to switch kickers because they just can't get it done. Money Mac, I mean, they can't get in the red zone for him.
Yeah, you're just down bad as an offense when we're like, yeah, the kicker is a bust in fantasy. All right, number 9. Great. Yeah, number 9 team here. We just talked about them. The Bengals opponent this week, the Arizona Cardinals. Marquise Brown's target share by week, 17%, 36%, 33%, and 24%. Marquise Brown's a good player, man. Again, he's another guy that might be a trade deadline candidate. I mentioned him with the Panthers, and I kind of pushed back when I was tweeting back and forth with people about this, that the Cardinals would want to trade Marquise Brown because he's a good player. They don't have that many good players, but he is in the last year of his contract. He was acquired by the previous regime. I think it kind of depends on their future with Kyler if they'd want to keep him around. But for now, Marquise Brown is a really good fantasy starter, like an every week flex wide receiver 3. Maybe low end 2. I don't know.
Yeah, man. I was scared off him in DFS last week with the thumb injury and the late afternoon start. I've had him on my bench a couple other bigger weeks this year. So I should have realized I was predicting to you he'd be a top 15 fantasy wideout this year per game while healthy. I don't know if his body frame can last the whole year. And Michael Wilson emerged last week. But man, I said last week his consensus rank was silly in the 40s. And I've been treating him as a top 25 guy when healthy. Because Josh Dobbs looks legit. They're in no hurry to bring back Kyler Murray. And that's being serious with that. And how Dobbs has performed versus the defenses, really, if you take those into account the last couple of weeks, it's been highly impressive. But yeah, Hollywood is a fantasy starter for the time being, pretty much without question. I mean, regardless of matchups.
I do this article on reception perception where I lay out the 10 receivers I like ahead of like consensus fantasy rankings based on their reception perception profiles. And, I just you can Google this, right? Like Matt Harmon versus consensus or whatever, and Fantasy Pros will spit it out to you. The one guy I had above consensus, but I didn't want to feature in the article because I was a coward, was freaking Marquise Brown. And I drafted him a lot. And if you use my rankings, you probably drafted him a lot because his ADP made no sense. But I was too much of a coward, Dalton, to listen to myself. What an idiot.
Same here with him. Yep, same here with him. Yeah, but he keeps getting it done.
Someone I wish I had not listened to myself on was Daniel Jones.
Same here.
Number 10, the New York Giants. They lead the league in hurries and pressures allowed. Now, I think this was the thing that was unknowable with Daniel Jones. Like, Andrew Thomas is one of the best offensive linemen, period, in the league. Like, he might be a top 2-3 left tackle, and he has not been available for this team, and this offensive line has been an absolute joke. I get that some quarterback, like people, CJ Stroud, look what he's doing in Houston. Well, Daniel Jones is not CJ Stroud, and I think anybody even that was drafting Daniel Jones in fantasy would say he's not that level of quarterback. I also find it interesting, this is another note on Daniel Jones, 6.9% of his throws have come on play action passes out of the pocket this year, according to Fantasy Points data. He has a pitiful 3.9 YPA and 64.6 passer rating, but it's a pretty stark departure from last year, the way they used him. 4th most of those plays in the NFL, play action throws out of the pocket. And that was 11% of his throws. So up last year, and he had a 127.3 passer rating. I think this team, a lot of what I said in the offseason, Dalton, was that, okay, they want to load Daniel Jones with more stuff. They want to evolve the offense from kind of like the gimmicky smoke and mirror stuff that they did last year. But now the offensive line is broken and their skill position players still aren't good. It's just not working at all.
Yeah, 99% of my non-super flex drafts this year, I came away with 2 of Anthony Richardson, Tua Tagovailoa, easier for you to say, and Daniel Jones. 2 out of 3 ain't bad, but I'm sure in some important big money leagues, I drafted Daniel Jones over one of the other guys, AR or Tua. That was been my strategy, just take 2 in rounds 9 through 11. And Daniel Jones has been a swing and a miss. I thought he'd be for sure top 10 this year. He's such a good runner. And but basically, he's only played one good half of football all year against the Cardinals when it was good enough to be the number 1 fantasy QB that week. But sacks are a quarterback stat, to be sure. But boy, that offensive line was an exception.
Sometimes.
It was an exception to the rule. This offensive line looks like a total disaster. Wan'Dale Robinson is definitely going to help him underneath. But what happened to Darren Waller? Is it the injury? Is it the age? Is it both? Either way, that was part of my thesis. He was so good out of 12 personnel, and you add him a tight end, it was going to be a nice marriage there. But Waller's been completely on milk cartons throughout the season, missing, and I hope he bounces back. I really do. Waller has that potential, but it hasn't been there, and Daniel Jones has been a fantasy bust.
Yeah, I mean, you drafted Daniel Jones so late, you just cut him and find a streamer, right? Like, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. Waller does sting a little bit, but again, the tight end position is so bad. Do you really, who are you kicking yourself that you didn't draft? I guess Sam Laporta late, but really, it's just been such a brutal year for the tight end position overall.
Yeah, totally.
Number 11,
Kittle,
Green Bay Packers.
Kittle.
Oh, yeah, go.
Yeah, I'm just saying Kittle, you look down the list. Pitts I'm serious. I dropped Pitts in a league for Ferguson. I mean, the tight end position is as stinky as it's ever been.
Number 11, Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson ran a route on just 43.9% of the dropbacks in his return. He was eased in. I think that was a little easy to see coming off an injury that obviously has been dogging him for a while. And it was a short week. But what are your expectations going forward for Christian Watson?
I'm shocked at the target rate that Romeo Doubs has commanded, and then we'll get a healthier Luke Musgrave. I ranked Watson too high in my weekly ranks last week. Thought he'd get a little bit more snaps, and that matchup's so good against the Detroit pass funnel defense. It's become I like Watson moving forward, top 30 fantasy receiver with potential to be a top 20 guy. But injuries are going to be a thing with him. I mean, that's part of the reason I ranked lower in the year. Last year it was always something with him. So I worry about that. But assuming he goes back, he's healthy now, goes back to being a full-time player. Maybe more of a boomer bust player, but his route running ability looks like a perfect fit for Jordan Love, who has like the highest average depth of target. So I still like him quite a bit, despite the goose egg in his return.
Romeo Doubs been targeted on 29% of his routes so far. He's somebody I need to take a look at, just because
yes, please do.
Started the year really nice from a reception perception standpoint. Not great, but solid. And then he really tailed off the longer the season went on, but he obviously had a high ankle sprain last year too, and that could have contributed to some of the poor performances there. Speaking of poor performances, New Orleans Saints, number 12 team here. The Saints are top 7 in sacks allowed. Just one of them have been the quarterback's fault, according to fantasy points data. That has sneaky been a big issue with the Saints. I know we're all focused on Derek Carr's little pathetic air yards per target, as we should be. He shouldn't have been playing in that game, especially considering the offensive line has not been good this year.
Yeah, Kamara, another stat is, I believe, not only did he have the fewest yards ever for 13 catches, he had the fewest yards ever for someone with 10 catches in an NFL game.
Yes.
I believe. So should Carr not even be out there if he's that compromised, if it's all screens?
No.
That was just a disaster, and hopefully he's healthier. And for the benefit of everyone, including Chris Olave. But you have to love the usage of Kamara. After 1 week, he's like easily the leader in the league in expected fantasy points just because of those targets.
Again, I'll shout out Nate Tice from the show. I was talking about the exempt list. He said that Kamara's got to be the only player in NFL history that's ever gotten 10 plus catches and complained right afterwards. That's got to be a first. But the way those catches were delivered, I understand why he was complaining. Number 13 team, Houston Texans, baby. Shout out to everybody that's like, wow, could the Cardinals end up having the first and second overall pick because the Texans are going to be so bad and the Cardinals are going to be so bad? Not so fast. The Texans might be picking like the middle of the first round because they've been legitimately good. The Houston Texans rank 3rd in the NFL in yards per attempt, behind only the Miami Dolphins and your San Francisco 49ers, Dalton. There's just no like qualifiers, asterisks, if, then, buts, whatever. CJ Stroud has just been really, really freaking good.
The Bears would have the top 2 picks in the draft if the season ended today. Yeah, what more can we say about Stroud? Passes the eye test. You look at, he's doing so much damage on third down as well. But can I say another guy I really like to try to trade for right now in fantasy is Dameon Pierce, man. I know his strong preseason usage did not carry over into the season like we expected. Last week, a different story, 24 carries, 74% of Houston's running back opportunities. He's top 10 in red zone carries this year, but has just one touchdown. Put differently, he's 15th in expected fantasy points, ranks outside the top 30 in real fantasy points. That decimated offensive line is getting 3 important pieces back. I know another guard went down as I was basically writing a column about Pierce. But they have one of the lowest neutral pass rates in the league. Pierce is awesome. He's in a good Bobby Slowick system. The caveat, it's a really tough matchup this week, actually. Atlanta has allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs. But okay, not this week, then maybe next week. Try to trade for Dameon Pierce. I mean, the game scripts are going to improve with Stroud being a baller. And the 3 offensive linemen are returning. Laramie Tunsil, it's a big deal. And Pierce is really good, and the usage is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, you mentioned Laramie Tunsil. He's coming back. They just this morning had Titus Howard. They designated him to return. They're starting right tackle. So that's a big deal. Yeah. Atlanta is a legit good defense. They get New Orleans the week after that. They're a good defense too, but then they come back from their week 7 bye in week 8 facing Carolina, Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, Arizona. So down the stretch, they have 2 games with the Titans later in the schedule.
The fantasy playoffs. Yeah, I always say use that for a way to get Tajay Spears as a great stash. But conversely, Houston has to face the toughest run defense twice during the fantasy playoffs. So yeah,
and sandwiched between those 2 games is the Browns, who have been one of the best defenses in the NFL. So the schedule's not great, but he could still give you some moments there. They face the Broncos in week 13, so maybe you trade for them on the just trade from the Broncos just for that 1 week itself.
Yeah, that's a rough fantasy playoff schedule.
Number 14, LA Chargers. Season low adjusted yards per attempt, 5.9 for Justin Herbert in week 4. It's just 1 week, but I am a little concerned about how that passing offense looked with Mike Williams out of the mix. Quentin Johnston's not ready to be like a big time contributor right this second. Maybe that changes after the bye. Maybe that changes down the schedule. But Josh Palmer's a solid player, but he's just a guy. Like, they got Donald Parham banged up. Eckler should come back after the bye. That'll help the run game for sure. But I'm a little worried that we're looking at another Chargers offense with playing with a roof over its head.
It's especially worrisome that he had that lower ADOT with Eckler out, because that's been a big difference there. Kelly can't command any targets whatsoever. So yeah, Herbert's dealing with that injury. I'm sure he will be fine non-throwing hand. But man, that offense had only 45 yards after halftime last week until Josh Palmer had a 51-yard catch to seal the game on 3rd and long. One note for the Chargers, they've faced 4 very favorable passing defenses. They started the season at home against Miami, at Tennessee, at Minnesota, then at home against the Raiders. So that has been pretty good and favorable for Herbert, who comes out of the bye facing the Cowboys, then in Kansas City, then a week after the Bears, it gets at the Jets. So very different schedule upcoming than they faced so far.
Broncos twice from weeks 14 to 17. So that will be good for this Chargers offense. But yeah, I just wonder.
Raiders in between too. So yeah, really nice finish.
Yep.
Indoors.
Really good finish. Really good finish. And hopefully by that time, Quentin Johnson is like up to speed, because they really, really need that to happen at this point. Number 15 team here, the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, whatever you saw out of Dorian Thompson-Robinson in that offense last week, just throw that in the trash. Like, give me a break. The week before that, though, Deshaun Watson had an 85.7% completion rate out of empty. There was 7 total dropbacks and a 9.7 YPA. That was an encouraging sign for Watson, because they're not really going to run an empty type of offense, with just everybody spread out, nobody in the backfield along with Watson. When you have Nick Chubb, you obviously don't have Nick Chubb anymore. Kareem Hunt hasn't been a factor. Jerome Ford has been the guy there, but you're not going to build the offense around Jerome Ford in the run game. I think at this point, they're going to slowly transition to Deshaun Watson, that centric offense. And I know Watson's not been good and, whatever, but I do kind of think like Kevin Stefanski's a smart coach who can figure this out over the bye week.
Yeah, completely throw out last week. Agree with you there. Start Amari Cooper with confidence moving forward. And Elijah Moore's, the targets look better than the production, and you'd like to see a little bit more usage down the field. He's more of a stash or flex at best. But maybe they change it coming out of the bye, the offense, and hopefully Watson's able to practice through it.
All right, we're skipping Washington Commanders here at 16 because they're playing on TNF. Number 17, Calvin Ridley's air yard share by week, 49%, 28%, 39%, 23%. I'm going to say this on every show this week that I'm on. My panic level with Calvin Ridley and the Jags offense overall is like near zero. I do think that his, like I bet him, and I mentioned this like in the preseason, like, that he could lead the NFL in receiving yards, but it was a longer shot bet. And like maybe he doesn't have that ceiling, like he's just not going to be that guy, but he still holds a critical role in this offense, and he's going to be like every other wide receiver. He's going to have big weeks. He's going to have slow weeks. You could do almost anything in like a 4-game sample size, like we're seeing right now with Calvin Ridley. But that's not to say that like the next 3 weeks he couldn't rattle off big games.
Yeah, on one hand, he has could have 4 more touchdowns this season. He's been super close numerous times. On the other, 2 targets is bad, and that's coming against a Falcons defense that's actually pretty solid all around, but very tough to run against. So, I mean, there should have been a lot of options there without Zay Jones, but Christian Kirk has just dominated the looks recently. So I'm discouraged as a guy who would go as high as late round 2, mid round 2 to draft Ridley in PPR leagues. So I'm very discouraged at this output. I don't know if he's playing injured or what the deal is, but yeah, I'm a little bit more discouraged than you are, it sounds like.
Well, I think last week, this is a team that they took their top corner and they just tracked Calvin Ridley around the field and AJ Terrell. And it's obviously a team that knows Calvin Ridley and knows what he can do really well. I think it's actually a good sign that Trevor Lawrence then just picked his spots with Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. And there's a little bit of like David Montgomery syndrome with Christian Kirk. Well, it's like, why is Christian Kirk getting all these? Look, Christian Kirk's a good player and he's playing well in his role. Like, it's not surprising that he's having a ton of targets right now when the matchups are dictating that way. But at some point, it will flip back the other direction, and Ridley will have his moments as well. Like again, he gets the Colts in week 6, the team he tore up in week 7 or in week 1, week 5 this week against the Bills. They just lost Tre'Davious White. They're a good defense, but we could see some deep shots. I think the thing with Ridley is he's just going to be pretty volatile. He's going to have these big weeks. He's probably going to have weeks, not where he gets 2 targets necessarily, but he might have like 5 or something like that.
And stick with ETN. I know fantasy managers are tired of hearing it, but boy, that volume is going to lead to big fantasy games.
Yeah, sneaky. I do think their offensive line needs to play a little bit better. Number 18 team, Los Angeles Rams. Kyren Williams played 72% of the snaps last week. That was his lowest since week 1. Ronnie Rivers got out there for 28%. Dalton, I think Ronnie Rivers is like a nice stash, maybe like a deep league type of guy. But I think 72% of the snaps, and look, he still touched the ball a ton, is probably what we're going to see out of Kyren Williams more than those 100% games we'd seen previously.
Did it have to do with the hip injury that he's dealing with now, or did that happen late? I'm not sure. But either way, Kyren Williams cannot have the same pace as he was having. A guy his size, he was just too much. But he continues to make some mistakes on the field, but just produce big fantasy stats. So we need to monitor this hip injury. It sounds like he's going to be fine. And absolutely, Ronnie Rivers is a guy in deeper leagues, or if you have Williams you want to stash on your bench because McVay just gives his lead back a ton of work. So absolutely, Rivers is on the fantasy radar.
They have Royce Freeman on the roster. They have Zach Evans is a guy they drafted too. So these are all just names to file away if Kyren Williams, who's a small back, gets injured with this massive workload that he has. Number 19 team, Atlanta Falcons. Talked about this with Eckler yesterday, but snaps for Bijan by week. 63%, 72%, 81%, 76%. Snaps for Tyler Algier, not so coincidentally, going in the other direction. 56, 44, 30, 26% of the snaps week by week. I do think the days of Tyler Algier being a starting fantasy back are probably over, and he just goes back to being one of the best holds in fantasy.
Oh, man, Robinson. He's an RB10 right now in half-point PPR leagues, but you should treat him as the RB2 or 3 at worst. His rush share has steadily increased each week. Tyler Algier's snap share has decreased each week. Robinson has the second most carries in the NFL without a rushing scored. He's third in the NFL in yards per touch, leads all running backs in receptions. He's a beast, and now he gets a home matchup against the Texans defense that's the most favorable when schedule adjusted. So I love him, man. The Falcons have the lowest pass rate over expectation in the NFL. Have you seen the highlights of Robinson, Bijan breaking ankles? I mean, so sick. So love him. I mean, he's a top 5 fantasy player moving forward.
Number 20, Indianapolis Colts. The Colts rank 23rd in rushing success rate. Anthony Richardson, you mentioned, is lapping the field in fantasy points per dropback. I wanted to include this rushing success rate number because I think that the narrative right now is like, well, Zach Moss has played really well. Zach Moss is producing really well, but I think when you watch the Colts, there's some meat left on the bone in the run game. And by the way, some of this is still including the Deion Jackson game in week 1, which was obviously a stone cold disaster. But I just think there's a lot that like Jonathan Taylor can still add to this offense if and when he's dropped into this mix.
Just want to see Anthony Richardson's points per 4 quarters right now. Jack Tribby tweet 30.3. That's 3 points more than Lamar Jackson in 2019 season and 7 points more than the current QB1 is getting. It's wild, man. I mean, it's crazy what he's doing. And it looked bad for the first half last year, too. It's like, is this going to be another clunker like he had in college? But Jonathan Taylor, it's obviously the big news this week. He's returning to practice. Looks like the coach really is open to him, wants him to return, and that's an ownership thing. So I think he absolutely, we could see him on the field getting 20-plus touches as soon as this week, and that's exciting. So sorry for Zach Moss, guys, but hopefully JT's back. Do you have that read? Or, I mean, I know Taylor's unhappy, too, with the situation, but I feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm just buying what the coach is selling.
Yeah, Steichen did say he's happy to be back. I mean, I hope that's the case. I think if you're Jonathan Taylor, like, why would you not want to come into this offense and like ball out and get your big contract at the end of the year? Like, because I just don't think there are any realistic trade spots that are going to pop up right now either.
Yeah, Miami is not a destination anymore with Achane. So, hopefully, Taylor, we get a fresh legs, healthy Taylor, and let's go. Taylor and Kupp, man. I actually have them on a couple teams. Taylor and Kupp
together.
I mean, yes, yeah. It's been probably have Dobbins on that squad as well, but and Deontay Johnson, no doubt. But if he can stay afloat, get these guys back, it would be quite a boost.
You get Deontay back too. Well, we'll talk about the Steelers here in a second. But you get Deontay back, but even just like Kupp and JT, man, you might mow down your league in the second half there. That is very possible.
Yeah, let's see. Kupp, I remain skeptical, but it would be nice if those guys returned to full health.
All right, I just mentioned them, the 21st team here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers ranked 27th in adjusted line yards. That's like a run blocking metric. 30th in PFF pass blocking efficiency. Dalton, I'm going to look you in the eyes here through the Zoom. I want you to make sure next year in the summer, if I'm even showing like remote signs of optimism for a team with a offensive line and a play caller I actively don't like, I want you to hold me accountable and dial me back in, because I feel like a complete dumb. Sorry for cursing twice, but I'm calling myself the dumb here. It should be allowed. I feel like a dumb. That's 3 times for getting even slightly enthusiastic about the Steelers offense when I can't stand the offensive coordinator and the offensive line was verifiably not going to be good.
So I almost DM'd you last night, but I figured you probably saw it because you're always on top of things. But tell me you saw the Matt Canada stuff.
I did see the Matt Canada burner account stuff. I hate to be the bearer of bad news there, but that's not.
No way. It's not real.
No, it's not real. That's not how NFL team emails work.
It's too good. Yeah, that was okay.
Yeah, it was too good. Look, dude, it's notable that there's even like one Matt Canada defender out there on planet Earth, because going into this week, I couldn't find you one single person that was like, listen, you guys need to give Matt Canada a break. All right. So I understand why people were suspicious that this might be Matt Canada's burner account, but the way team employees' email addresses work, it would go Steelers.nfl.com, right? So it doesn't go Steelers.com, like Matt Canada, Steelers.com. I even have a source inside the NFL that confirmed what Matt Canada's actual email address is. And that is unfortunately not it. Yeah.
Dan Robbins is fake news. You just did break my heart. I was I enjoyed it better when that was Canada responding to all these people furiously like that. But good work, Harmon. Good work.
Yeah. Sorry to confirm the bad news there, but yeah, I did see it. I was on top of it, and it was just entertaining that anybody in the world, even if it is not Matt Canada himself, is out here caping up for Matt Canada, because prior to last night, I probably couldn't have found you like one person on the internet.
Yeah, no, wild. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Number 22, Tennessee Titans. Derrick Henry has played 48 and 38% of the snaps in the Titans' 2 losses, 71 and 59% in their 2 wins. I kind of expect this to continue, and I kind of think it's actually a good thing for Derrick Henry to not just be out there for every single damn snap, because he won't break. Even though he seems unbreakable, he is still a human playing running back. It is possible. And the Titans don't have like the worst schedule their next few games. They get the Colts. That should be neutral. Ravens, maybe they take it to them, but then they get to bye in week 7. Falcons, winnable game. Steelers, winnable game. Bucks should be competitive. Like, I think there's a lot of chances for Derrick Henry to have a nice run here.
Yeah, there are going to be some games where his volume isn't quite there just because of game script and this team's not great, but I would just ignore the snap share numbers with Henry and Tyjae Spears here and just treat the big dog like you would, top 10, top 5 type RB each week. Don't worry about the snap share. He's going to get the touches most weeks.
I'm in agreement with you there. Number 23, the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith. Close your ears if you're a JSN redraft bag holder. Geno Smith is tied for the 6th most dropbacks with 2+ tight ends on the field. Only Desmond Ridder, Josh Allen, whose team drafted a first-round tight end when they just signed another to a big contract extension, Mac Jones, Danny Dimes, and Trevor Lawrence are the only ones that have more. Obviously, there's a little bit of a theme here. Lawrence, one of his 3 wide receivers is banged up, but they're struggling in pass protection. Danny Dimes, struggling in pass protection are the New York Giants. Mac Jones is struggling to do anything right. Desmond Ridder, they're struggling to do anything right, but their offensive line is sneaky struggling in pass protection. The Seahawks have been missing their top 2 offensive tackles. They've had real injuries at that position. I do think once we get later into the season, we'll see more 11 personnel and we'll see more of JSN out there. Although I noted with Austin yesterday that there's this guy, Jake Bobo, who's like functioning as their blocking receiver. And that is a problem for JSN. But still, it's been a really bad run out for Jackson Smith and Jigba. But this, I think, is the biggest problem. These offensive line injuries leading to multiple tight ends on the field.
It's been so bad. I considered dropping JSN on the Tuesday overnight Yahoo leagues. Decided against it. Woke up and listened to your podcast with Eckler, and yeah, you said under the hood it's not so bad. Looking at JSN, correct? I mean, it's not necessarily the player because we talked about his reaction to Geno on the sideline, and Pete Carroll, who gives the most glowing quotes, was downright not great. His talk before last week too about referring to the rookie wideout. So I was extremely worried. It's ADOT is last in the league among receivers or bottom 3 or whatever. But looking at it, you're saying that just structurally,
what did Pete Carroll say?
I can't remember exactly, but it was just like basically saying he's struggling a bit. For him, it was just considered for him harsh.
I'll have to look that up because I would say that his route running and stuff has been fine. I can't find anything.
It's nothing great. Don't even worry about it. I'll send you to it later, but and maybe it's overblown and it was whatever, rosy enough. But man, why are they not attempting anything downfield? And you know what else? Like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett aren't exactly lighting the fantasy world on fire either here. I mean, what is going on? I mean, I get that Walker's getting all the touchdowns, but yeah, okay, you just said it's a combination of the personnel and the block. Even Bobo absolutely is an issue. So I don't know, man. I just feel like they should throw the football to him down the field, even if he's not getting the snaps. Who cares? Why are they not at least attempting these targets down there?
Yeah, I think it's just tough. I don't think they have his role totally figured out yet because it was a new role in the offense, right? It's not like they had a big-time slot receiver last year, so I think they are still trying to figure that out, which maybe I'll try to interpret this Pete Carroll quote whenever you send it to me. But I do think that they're just struggling to kind of implement him. The protection issues are super present, and they're working well around it. I think Shane Waldron, honestly, unlike Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka in New York, they are working around the issues in real time. But
yeah, Shane Waldron, he's never dealt with a slot receiver. He wouldn't know how to use one. I mean,
but I'm saying on this
I'm just
offense,
saying, come on. I'm trying to back my narrative here. I mean, I'm trying to remember why I ranked this guy so high. All right, go ahead.
No, yeah, I think they're problem solving in real time for missing both of their starting tackles in protection, and I think part of it is having all these tight ends on the field. But maybe we see a different offense and a different role for JSN to end the season. But your point about Cooper Kupp and stuff like that is fair. Number 24. Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys have run 7.6 plays per drive. They have the most time per drive, 3 minutes and 33 seconds in the NFL. They've also had the second best average field position in the NFL. They're just such a weird team right now because we haven't really seen them in a normal game, but we're obviously going to see that this weekend against your 49ers.
Oh, yeah, man. It's weird. Yeah, Dak Prescott, they're having throw shorter than ever, maybe in an effort to curtail the interceptions from last year. Also, just they've had such weird game scripts with their defense scoring so many touchdowns. I mean,
and they've had so many plays in the red zone too, right? Because they have struggled to punch it in the red zone.
Right. So that's going to affect efficiency big time. Yeah, because you're all condensed in that part of the field.
And the depth, too. Right? The depth of your passes too, because it's not like you're going to be ripping them 15 yards downfield when you're inside the 10-yard line.
Yeah, I've been adding Ferguson and dropping Pitts when available, totally. Big time. I think the touchdowns will come there with his. I believe he leads all receivers and pass catchers and red zone targets this year. But yeah, they've been dealing with some offensive line injuries, and we'll see if they're healthy for Sunday night. And then conversely, I'm terrified for the 49ers offensive line against Parsons and company. Lawrence is playing great too.
That is going to be a really good matchup there. We'll talk about it more in just a second. Number 25. The Detroit Lions. Jared Goff leads all quarterbacks that have started multiple games this year in adjusted completion rate on throws of 20-plus yards per PFF. This is notable, Dalton, because supposed deep threat Jamison Williams has actually had his suspension reduced. It only really in the future will be 2 games, but it's now he's going to be back this week. You're making a hell of a face over there. How do we feel about Jamison Williams coming in?
Sorry, I'm just now reading the news that Dan Campbell was non-committal about St. Brown's availability for Sunday's game while the receiver tends to an unspecified injury. So not great when someone's considering the Lions in my big Survivor league there. So sorry, just get a little and I have Amon-Ra in more than a few fantasy places as well. So he's playing with that steel. I'm not sure if he's playing with that steel plate. Has that been confirmed? But either way, he's dealing with possibly turf toe. And do you know that the Lions, I'm sure you do, but have quietly been one of the most run-heavy teams this year. They're just like totally going all in on the Campbell ground game. And with Laporta emerging and now Jamison Williams back, St. Brown's fantasy value isn't looking, great for people like myself who took him, 6th overall in leagues, I would say.
Yeah, probably not people that took him 6th overall, but I don't think he's a candidate right now. And like one of my bold predictions was he leads the NFL in catches, yards, and touchdowns. He's probably not going to do that, but he's still going to be fine. And he's whatever he's dealing with right now with the turf toe stuff, he is battling through it, man, and playing extremely well. So I wouldn't be too worried about St. Brown. And it might be like he's on the injury report and we're getting these fishy quotes from Campbell every single week. But yeah, Jamison Williams back. I'm not sure. Jamison Williams is going to end up looking like a better pick and a better fantasy pickup if you can get him off the waiver wire. Like he should be rostered in all leagues just on the ceiling case alone. But it's going to look better than it did when he was going to miss 6 games versus 4 games. Like 2 games is just a huge difference here, especially because now his bye is not until week 9, right? I don't think you can play him this week because he might come out and run like 5 routes, right? Like he wasn't having a good camp and he was injured at the end of camp anyways. But I don't know. Josh Reynolds is still like, I can already tell people are just like, forgetting about Josh Reynolds and like focusing solely on Jamison Williams. But I think Reynolds is going to remain a really big part of this offense.
Yeah, I was on his Spaces appearance last night and someone asked me Reynolds or Jamison Williams, and I'm like, give me the upside with Williams. But yeah, you're totally right. Reynolds is not going away. But give me the guy who had the highest recorded speed one week he played last year among receivers, and with the crazy numbers in college and all that. And a banged up St. Brown. I mean, yeah, give me that guy who's, we don't know his fantasy upside yet, where we do know Reynolds. But Reynolds is you're right. He's going to remain. And if St. Brown misses this game, don't be surprised if Josh Reynolds leads the team in targets this week.
Yeah, I think in an ideal scenario, your 3 receiver set is St. Brown in the slot. You've got Josh Reynolds as your vertical X, and you've got Jamison Williams as like that movable Z receiver. So all 3 of these guys can be on the same the field at the same time. But with the way they're running the ball, with the way that Sam Laporta is commanding targets, like there's not a lot of meat to shave off the bone for Williams or Reynolds, really.
Yeah, I was going to say Laporta is going to demand all his targets too, but Jared Goff's still just a guy you in fantasy target home games, averaging 2.6 TD, 2.7 TD passes since last season at home.
Well, should be able to smoke the Panthers this week. Number 26 team, Miami Dolphins. Devon Achane leads all running backs last week in snaps, rushing share, route participation, and he also tied Raheem Mostert for the team high target share. I do think that like there was a genie not going back in the bottle type situation with Achane after week 3. And now I'm wondering like how soon is it till we're just saying like he's the 1A at worst in this backfield.
Yeah, it was about a 50-50 share entering the fourth quarter last week, and then Achane had 11 of his 18 carries in the fourth quarter. But dude looks so good. Yes, there's no way he will keep up this efficiency. It's insane. I believe he's the first player to score 6 touchdowns over his first 4 games, and he didn't play week 1, and he had 1 carry week 2. So it's like absolutely historical amount of touchdowns he's scoring right now, and he looks awesome while doing it. But yeah, I mean, how many touches he's going to get? You're going to use him in DFS this week. So these are questions that Jeff Wilson is eligible to return this week. But man, if you have Achane on your fantasy team, it looks like the definition, the overused league winner to me. I mean, wow. I mean, on that offense is lapping the field in yards per play. You know, Miami is getting 8.0, second best. My Niners 6.3. I mean, it's in a different tier. I mean, it's a terrific situation to be in for a running back. And my guy Mostert is 31 years old, never had more than 185 carries in his career. So yeah, man, to the moon, Achane just looks awesome. And remember, he was considered his receiving ability was supposed to be his asset. We haven't even really gotten there. Yes, some targets,
That's
but
true.
He's doing all this on the ground. Oh man, this looks awesome. Obviously, the Armstead injury is a bummer. But man, Achane looks terrific. Great job if you have him on your team.
All right, number 27 team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to say this to you, Dalton, because I'm not going to say this to Andy Behrens when he's on the show, but God, Andy was so right to push me on Baker Mayfield being this year's Geno Smith. Baker ranks 8th in adjusted net yards per attempt this year. And I'm going to have another look you in the eye moment right here across the Zoom with you, Dalton. Again, next summer, if I'm sitting here and there's some team with 2 really, really good receivers and a pretty good offensive line, and the roster is just littered with good players, but I'm focusing on this veteran quarterback and I'm overemphasizing we don't know who this guy is. I mean, it's literally the same thing that happened with Geno Smith last year. Like Baker's due for a puke on his shoes game, but Baker was god awful in Carolina, but on balance, of course, throughout his career, he's been fine. Like he's been a sub-average starting quarterback, and he's getting really elevated by this coaching staff, which we didn't know who Dave Canales was, but he's getting elevated by this coaching staff who's drawing it up really well. He's got 2 good receivers to throw to, behind an offensive line that is fine. It's not a disaster. It just with veteran quarterbacks, these guys who have played in the league for a while, the mind starts to catch up, right? But these guys don't have great physical tools. I mean, Kirk Cousins is a great example. Baker's a great example. And Jared Goff is even a great example. I mean, these other guys are in a different tier than Baker, but still, and he's younger than them as well. But once they've started to see all this stuff, if you throw them in a good situation, they can actually play above their heads. The Panthers were a Garbo situation when Baker was there last year. The Bucs are not that. I'm surprised that I'm surprised that this is working out so well. And I'm frankly pissed off at myself that I didn't see it coming. And you did try to talk me into Mike Evans.
I did. Well, and a highly inefficient back too. Such a setup for the quarterback there. By the way, Mayfield is ran the ball 6, 8, and 8 of the 3 games attempts. Of fantasy production hasn't been there, but man, a rushing touchdown it looks like to be in his future. He's a tough guy too. He took a brutal hit on his touchdown pass to Otton last week where they twisted him. He looked like out for the season and returned. He's balling. I tried to talk you into Mike Evans, but let's really give props to Andy Behrens here. I thought it was a bit, frankly, when he was saying that Baker Mayfield. I thought he was joking, but back-to-back years, dude looks like Nostradamus with Josh Jacobs' call, and now the Baker Mayfield call, who's been quite the fantasy asset, likely on many fantasy benches. But man, if you have him in super flex leagues, he's been money.
And the Laporta thing too, which I wasn't sure if that was a bit, like how much he loved Laporta. But yeah, if you were listening to Andy Barron's like, I can't tell if this is a bit or not. Like, go ahead and draft whatever player he's talking about, basically.
Yeah, seriously.
And we'll say all these nice things on the show behind his back, but we will not say them publicly. All right, number 28, the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen leads the NFL in completion rate over expected. Yeah, he's a stud. I don't know that we have too much to say there.
Just Xavier Howard had quieted Diggs for like 6 straight matchups, and oh man, that didn't happen last week. That was a clinic. That was impressive.
Number 29, Baltimore Ravens. Zay Flowers ranks 8th among all pass catchers in target share so far this year. Gets the Steelers with this week. The Steelers have obviously allowed monster games to wide receivers of late. Obviously Nico Collins last week, our guy, Brandon Ayuk in week 1, our other guy, Devontae Adams, Amari Cooper even had 90 yards on him. We'll see. The Steelers might make personnel changes. They might elevate rookie corner Jerry Porter Jr. Over one of the veterans, Levi Wallace or Patrick Peterson. But I don't know. Zay Flowers hasn't had like a blow-up game. I think this could be a blow-up game for him.
Great call. I mean, Beckham and Bateman still banged up. Andrews got the touchdowns last week. They don't have a running back. So, I mean, it's set up in the matchup. Yeah, love it. Flowers blow-up week right there. And are you on Keaton Mitchell watch like I am on stashed on all my fantasy teams? Let's go.
Keaton Mitchell, yeah, no, I think that's a good call by you. When could we see Keaton Mitchell is the latest headline for him. So could we be getting him soon?
Could be activated from IR this week, according to Coach John Harbaugh. You look at his college stats. Smaller guy, only going to carry the whole load, but absolutely the most physically upside among these running backs in the Ravens. And yeah, he could be a piece that's different than the other backs for an offense that's getting little production from their running back. So I mean, it's a long shot, but and probably available in 95% of Yahoo leagues still here now.
Good
but
call
yeah, grab Keaton Mitchell if you have some space.
I mean, smaller back. We're living in a world where Devon Achane has taken over the sport, and Jaleel McLaughlin is like a top pickup off waivers. So I'm down for some Keaton Mitchell hype. I like this deep stash out there. It's not like any of these other backs have necessarily impressed. You know who has impressed? Number 30 team here, San Francisco 49ers. Brock Purdy, shout out, has now eclipsed Tua in the EPA per dropback race. He is number 1 in the NFL. It is worth noting, Dalton, that the competition gets a lot harder. Obviously, we've talked about Cowboys Sunday night, but then the Browns the week after that.
Yeah, he's done it both ways. 2 weeks ago, the Giants blitzed him like a historically high rate. Last week, Arizona did the opposite. Purdy's been effective against both with the banged up Debo. Yeah, man, love to see it with Purdy. He is due for a few turnovers, man. He's gotten away with some drop picks, but so efficient. Last week was a joke. Last week he didn't. 20 of 21. I mean, he had just crazy, man. Just picking teams apart. And yes, it's mostly in the mid range, but he can crank it downfield too. Our guy Ayuk, highest graded receiver in PFF through the first 4 games, and he played one of them with only one shoulder. I mean, the dude is just open, and yeah. It's a beautiful thing to see Purdy to Ayuk.
I will say Fantasy Points data has Brock Purdy at only a 2.7 turnover worthy throw rate.
Nice.
So
I like it.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I just
probably
think
extra harsh. Yeah, it's just yeah.
Well, dude, everybody's extra harsh on Brock Purdy. Like, extra harsh might as well be Brock Purdy's middle name, bro. And like, you're a fan of the team. There are so many people out there that are just like, he stinks. It's all freaking Kyle Shanahan and these weapons. It's like, okay, well, great. He's doing exactly what he needs to do, man. Like, I think that there are a lot more non-functional quarterbacks out there that would not be doing what Brock Purdy is doing. And like, the guy they drafted 3rd overall never did this. Okay. So yeah, I think people need to give Brock Purdy a little more credit.
On one hand, it's nice that Purdy can punch in scores. He absolutely is part of his fantasy game. But on the other, he's lost 2 touchdown passes last 3 weeks to these little swing passes, one to Debo and one to McCaffrey. And you could almost rule the first one, I thought, was forward, but they both were ruled. He threw the ball forward, forward pass, but they were ruled rush attempts. So his fantasy points could be 8 points higher easily.
Criminal.
Or
all right. 31 here, Kansas City Chiefs. I feel like this is another thing, in addition to people need to respect Brock Purdy, another thing I've been talking about for a minute here now. Isaiah Pacheco is kind of quietly taking over this backfield, and it wasn't so quiet on Sunday night. 6th most expected fantasy points according to Fantasy Points data among running backs the last 2 weeks. Like, again, I think he's icing everybody out, and like, I'm kind of buying into Pacheco as a clear, like, every week starter and somebody that I want to have on my fantasy teams.
That Jets run D is legit. I loved your commentary about his running style. Like, I can't figure out if it's the best or it makes him look worse. I don't know. It's crazy, the high knees running. But either way, he's effective and he's due for more, man. The usage is going in the right direction for him, and he's getting a ton of looks in the red zone too. They're treating him like their red zone back in Kansas City, even targeting him. Pacheco absolutely has the upside to even be like a top 12 fantasy back moving forward.
Yeah, it's not like the passing game's clicking on all cylinders in Kansas City. Like sometimes it's hard to criticize anything that Andy Reid and these guys are doing over there, but sometimes I do think like, let's just like sack up and just run, like power run the ball. Like right now with this great offensive line that you have, like I think that would be kind of part of the solution here for Kansas City.
If you squint, I could probably paint a brighter picture for Rice. Rashee Rice is going in the right direction as well. His snap percentage, I know it's still not a ton, but he's commanding targets. He's just clearly a better player than Sky Moore. Kelsey hasn't eclipsed, 75 yards in many weeks. Rice, I could see as the guy to emerge here over the second half of the season. Stash him where possible.
Yeah, I could see it too. I'm working on charting him out right now, so I want to hold off on any full takes on Rashee Rice, but I do hear your sentiment there on him. Tell you what, he looks a lot better now that he's healthy than he did in college, where his route running and everything was terrible, but he was clearly playing with like a toe injury or a foot injury or something. Number 32, the final team here, Philadelphia Eagles. They're ranked 32 here, and by the way, I mean, come on, they rank 10th in EPA per play on offense, 6th in success rate. I feel like there are some circles of like media that wants to gaslight you into, should we be worried about the 4-0 Eagles? Shut up. I mean, come on, give me a freaking break here. Like, what are we talking about? They're 4-0. They have all these great players. AJ Brown is tearing through the league right now. I couldn't be less worried about the Eagles overall as a team. Like, go outside, give me a break. Like, let's have this conversation in damn December if we're panicking over the Eagles. They look fantastic, even if things aren't all the way there yet. They could look even better. I mean, we know the deal in fantasy at this point with the Eagles, but I just got to get that off my chest that I can't stand this like small groundswell of people that like we should be worried about the Eagles.
It's hard to win every week in the NFL, and they just keep doing that. Absolutely. They've not looked quite as good as they did last season at times, and they have some weaknesses maybe in the maybe back end of their defense at times. But boy, if you had Survivor last week, the Eagles Washington game gave you a ride. I mean, let me tell you, there was every single critical penalty went against the Eagles just consistently. It was wild, the amount of crucial penalties called on 3rd and long repeatedly in the second half of that game. And then Eagles could have ran the clock out, kicked a field goal, game over. Instead, Hurts goes deep to A.J. Brown for a touchdown, allowing a minute 40 for Washington with 7 minutes. And then A.J. Brown, for good measure, taunts after that touchdown. Really interesting decision. Riverboat Ron doesn't have them kick a really long extra point. But
the Riverboat Ron thing is BS.
Well, officially retired after when I get to that. But he could have had them try to attempt like a 53-yard extra point. Instead, he takes it on the kickoff, which did result in a 36-yard field position. And then on the final play of regulation, the Dotson touchdown, so sick. And then I thought for sure they were going for 2, and they decided not to. Thought their offense was gassed. And then, overtime happened where McLaurin was 1/10 of an inch from making a catch that, they might win that game if they rule that a catch and he doesn't come down on the foot instead. But that was one of the wildest, best football games of the season. It'll go down as one of the best all year. It was so entertaining.
It was awesome. Can't wait to see what Sam Howell does as an encore on Thursday night. My dad's in town, fellow Sam Howell.
My God, yeah. Guts of a burglar, man. You see him hanging in there. Dude, he just, after taking all those sacks, just stinging in the pocket. Howell is the man, dude. He really is. I like watching him play.
Yeah, I will have to see if Hal Harmon wants to swing by the house on Thursday to watch Sam Howell. And let's transition into Thursday Night Football here.
Oh, nice.
Chicago Bears at Washington Commanders. The Commanders are 5.5-point favorites. You got a 44.5-point total. Let's start on the Bears side here. My stat for the Bears, Cole Kmet leads the team with 0.22 targets per route run. Wouldn't have had that on my bingo card. I'm not totally convinced that Cole Kmet's going to have a consistent role every single week. His 2 touchdowns last week were just kind of like, oh yeah, the Broncos defense will blow things like that every now and again. But hey, again, you can't really stick your nose up at a living, breathing touchdown threat at tight end right now, and that is who Cole Kmet is. But I don't know, thoughts on the Bears in this game?
Yeah, and then suddenly DJ Moore has projected to get really good fantasy stats or real-life stats this season after last week's game. Obviously, Denver helped. Justin Fields was throwing the ball all over the field. His only incompletion last week in the first half was a final play in the Hail Mary I don't believe he had ever thrown for 300 yards. He did so easily. And he's running more design plays too. So absolutely encouraging signs for his fantasy value moving forward. Although this one, a much, much tougher matchup. Let's talk my guy Khalil Herbert, who took over Chicago's backfield last week. Season high 79% snap share. That increased to 86% in the second half. Again, Denver's defense helped. Man, it looked like they just have not learned how to tackle this season. But Herbert also finally looked like the player that led the league in rush yards over expectation last season. So he's taken more percentage of the carries the last few weeks. Meanwhile, Rashawn Johnson saw a season low snap percentage last week. His advanced stats are just downright ugly, man. I mean, I know people love Johnson. I know they do, but he really took advantage of some backup defenses in college from what I understand, and he has not looked the part in the NFL. Herbert has the fourth most carries without a rushing touchdown this year, leads the league in missed tackles force rate, owns a real healthy, Dwayne McFarland pointed this out, 19% target per route run rate. Man, I don't know. There's a lot to like here for Herbert if he continues to see this volume, which I hope does happen, but obviously not a great matchup against Washington.
People got themselves in a real tizzy about Roschon Johnson's check down targets after week 1 when the Bears offense got smoked. So yeah, I'm with you that Khalil Herbert, I think, still has the kind of stranglehold on this backfield. DJ Moore, worth noting, is currently averaging 5.8 yards per reception after some lower numbers the last couple years in Carolina. This is more akin to his game. I think vertical receiver stuff is kind of his best work. And, he's not a transformative talent like an A.J. Brown or a Steph Diggs, but if and when the Bears offense, which I don't expect to get rolling, okay, I think a lot of what we saw last week is Denver related, but still, I do think, DJ Moore at least has been a good fit in that regard for Fields.
Yeah, what are your thoughts on Fields moving forward? Is it get rid of him after because of Denver? I mean, I know there's still a lot of question marks. Boy, there was another, and he just gifts the other team an opposing defense a touchdown every single week, it seems like. But fantasy wise, I mean, the dude ran for 90 or plus yards the last 6 weeks or whatever last year.
Minnesota is a pretty good spot for them in week 6. Raiders, Chargers. I probably wouldn't start him, and maybe this looks terrible because he has a big game, but I might look for some level of an alternative. I think I like Sam Howell in this game better than I like Justin Fields, but that schedule's really nice. Minnesota, Las Vegas, Los Angeles Chargers in week 8. So I wouldn't say all hope is lost for Fields. I think he can be an okay fantasy quarterback, but I don't think he has the top 5 ceiling that we might have imagined coming into the year.
Yeah, it feels like he's gotten a lot more flack than, say, Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, who are way, way worse than him so far this year. So I don't know. It's certainly I
think because he's not a good real life player.
Right.
I think that's
100%. That's why. Yeah. No, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Washington side of this, my stat for the Commanders. No one on the Commanders has a target share higher than 19%. Woof. I mean, this is one thing I did not see coming. Sam Howell's looked rocky. Okay. He's looked volatile, but when he's hot, it looks pretty good. But they're just spreading the ball out so much. And I think when people can't complain that Curtis Samuel's involved, Curtis Samuel's a good player. Even Logan Thomas is a pretty solid tight end, but I could use with a little bit of a little less Byron Pringle and De'Ami Brown routes and stuff like that.
Just want to say Justin Fields ranks 12th in fantasy points scoring total among quarterbacks this year, sandwiched between legends Brock Purdy and Baker Mayfield. Washington, Jahan Dotson, bro. What man, just so are you dropping him? Probably not, right? Still stashing him. Yeah.
I can't drop him. He's too good and makes a crucial play. He's dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury, which I think played a part at least in some of the stuff last week, but I don't think you can drop him. He's just too good, and this team invested in him. I think at some point they constrict the targets a little bit. We see this sometimes with new coaching staffs, Denver's going through it too, but I think that these guys are too good. McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and Curtis Samuel for the targets not to constrict to these guys. But no, it is worth noting.
Start Scary Terry with confidence, 10 targets last week, hopefully fully recovered from that turf toe by now and gets a nice matchup against the Bears. Brian Robinson is my biggest regret of the fantasy season, I would probably say, because I really liked him and Herbert, as much as I hyped Herbert there, but I didn't get enough of Robinson. I swear I liked him. We talked about it. I disparaged Antonio Gibson in my columns, but I just do not have him on enough fantasy teams. I really hit home when I moved him up to my RB3 this week. I mean, here we are, week 5, and I'm ranking him as my RB3. So, I mean, yeah, that's... Oh, he's the consensus RB4, it looks like. I thought I saw
that too. When I opened it up, it was like Bijan and Brian Robinson are like near each other, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, okay. The only PPR is 6, but whatever. He's getting ranked by consensus borderline top 5. I mean, and it's deserved. Yeah, he had 2 more touchdowns against the Eagles last week, by the way.
Yeah. Fumbled one, which, I mean, it's notable that Antonio Gibson fumbles and he's immediately like sent to the shadow realm, and not so for Brian Robinson. The only game he's played fewer than 50% of the snaps was obviously Buffalo, where they got blown out 37-3, but neutral game script in week 1, neutral game script in week 2, neutral game script in week 4. I expect that to be at least neutral or positive here at home against the Bears. These are the type of games where you do want to dial up your expectations for B-Rob.
It was just like a pitch, and Gibson immediately picked it back. Like he fumbled it, but he fumbled again too, Gibson last week. I mean, that guy does every single week. He fumbles. Yeah. So Robinson looks just like a total beast out there, man. It's almost like not being shot right before playing in the NFL helped him this season. So just awesome, man. What a baller.
What a baller, man. He's awesome. All right, Dalton, that's going to do it. We don't have to say goodbye for long, buddy. You're going to be on the show tomorrow for the binge stream skip preview.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I have a lot of takes. I'm ready for that. Good talking ball, man.
Always good. Dalton and I tried to be a little more like big picture on this one because we're going to dial in on games and matchups for the week 5 binge stream skip viewers guide. That will be in your feeds tomorrow. Until then, we're out.